and welcome to Analog Shtick, a podcast about video games. I'm Mark Robinson, and hello, Russ.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going really good, thanks.
It's nice to have you back on after...
Yeah, it's been so long.
Yeah.
Where have you been? I haven't seen you for
4 or 5 days?
ages.
Yeah?
Yeah. I spoke to you the other day. I've seen you quite a lot, actually.
Sorry about that. I try to stay out of your life, but you just can't keep me away.
Yeah, not even the police can keep you away from me. I don't know that.
You bought PlayStation 4.
I did buy a PlayStation 4, yeah.
Do you think this is going to last longer than your Wii U?
Yes. Probably.
Yeah.
Well, I'll see how the eBay listing of it does right now, actually.
Okay, right.
No, as a brief aside for people who don't know, I sell everything that I buy. A good case in point is that I made a PC a couple of weeks ago, and that's no longer sitting anywhere in my house. It's in somebody else's house who paid me money for it. But yeah, no, I'm actually, I had a PS3 for a long time, and I've had multiple Xbox 360s over time. And a game is coming out, I want to play it, so I'll buy one. And then I'll sell it. But the PS3 is always one that I kind of kept. So the PS4 is intended as a long-term investment.
Okay. And what have you got for it then? What have you bought? Talk me through.
I got a bundle with Infamous. Infamous was the game which I bought it for. Mm-hmm. I also got the Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes as well, which is good. And yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I also picked up Killzone. So I've got three games, 3 next generation games. Or I guess you could say Metal Gear is a cross-generation thing. But, these are the games which are apparently meant to showcase the power of the PS4. And I felt some power.
Yeah?
I felt that power wash over me as the lovely lighting effects and rain effects graced my TV.
Did you feel it deep within your loins, the power coming through?
Yeah, kind of deep, not massively deep, The last console generation was so long, wasn't it, that kind of PCs just went far beyond kind of what was possible on the consoles. That kind of now it's the consoles kind of catching up to that. It was always the case that the consoles was sort of this super kind of not super advanced, but more advanced than where PCs were for the general mainstream in terms of like costs to build a PC that could run what a console was doing. But now it's kind of the other way around. You can build a PC that can do a similar amount of graphical content than a new console can. So it wasn't as great of an experience that you would expect with a new console. But, it's definitely exciting. For the first generation of games that are coming out on them, then that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's weird when you say like the time span between the console generations, because the PlayStation 2 one was from, 2001 to 05, 06, sort of that general period.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but that's, for me, still seemed so much longer than it actually was. And I guess probably just because that was my teenage years of being playing video games and stuff. But yeah, I still don't sort of think to myself that that this generation was as long as it actually was, even though it did go on for just under a decade.
Yeah, it was really long. I mean, I think I put it into perspective of the things that I was doing with my life when they first came out. And what I'm doing now, and it's like...
That's a way to make yourself feel really, really old really quickly.
Yeah, I know. But, it's huge amount of things that I'd done in that time. And it's, it was a long time.
Well, talk me through Metal Gear Solid, because that's the one that I have also played a little bit of around yours. And also because... I would presume if you played it for any more than about 20 minutes, then you've probably played the entire game, so, have a full review of it.
Yeah. There certainly is a lot of stuff going around saying that it's very, very short, and it kind of is. But yeah, it's Ground Zeroes, so it's kind of like a setup to the Phantom Pain, which is going to be the main sort of Metal Gear Solid 5 game that's coming out, I think like next year or something, which in Metal Gear Solid land is about 4 years' time, I guess. But yeah, it's you play as kind of Snake, like the original kind of Snake, the guy who turns into Big Boss. So not the Snake from the kind of PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 and 3, Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3, and 4 games. And you basically just have this one base and kind of detention center on somewhere in Cuba. I don't really know where. I haven't paid attention to that sort of stuff. So you have a mission to go in and extract a couple of people who've been kind of kidnapped or kind of double agents, I think. I couldn't really work it out. But essentially, it's this big base. And it sounds really kind of small and boring, but the base itself it feels really alive. And I guess we'll come on to kind of maybe Infamous in a bit later, but to do a direct comparison, Infamous is this big kind of like city that that's populated and you run around with, and then in Metal Gear Solid you have this one little kind of like island with a base on it, and the base feels so much more alive than the whole city does in Infamous because it's much more concentrated, and there seems to be kind of people are just going about their business and doing what they're meant to be doing in this base. So you have guards who are obviously patrolling, and you have guards who are in watchtowers, and some people will walk around and then jump in a jeep and then drive around, get off somewhere else, walk around a bit, get back in the jeep. So it feels much more alive, and obviously the contextual reference is far more focused, so it feels a little bit more refined. But definitely kind of moving around this base, it feels really kind of impressive just in terms of a setting and an atmosphere. And the moving around is kind of the biggest thing, I think. Metal Gear games have always been horrible to control, absolutely awful. I think just because they're Japanese games, right? That's the stereotype. But this feels so much better. The movement and the controls just feel exactly as you'd expect them to. You can aim and run at the same time. You can crouch and move really quickly instead of going into this weird snapping kind of crouching phase and then pressing forwards to crawl, and just some weirdness that's always been in the Metal Gear series. So it's a complete refinement of the controls and the movement and the kind of the aiming and the shooting, and even the kind of the close quarters combat stuff and going up behind a guard, and then previously you had to work out whether you were standing in the right set of pixels to press square, and then not kind of throw them over your shoulder and things. But this one kind of works. When you press a button that it's meant to do something and it'll do it. And that's really nice for a Metal Gear game. A lot of the things which needed ironing out have definitely been ironed out in this kind of initial kind of release for Metal Gear 5, which is promising.
It's very weird that the controls, and I'm not going to go on a big Metal Gear Solid bashing session, but it's very weird that the controls over the series have been almost celebrated and praised for being the way they are, even though by the general idea of a solid control setup, they're pretty horrid. And it was nice for me to play this one and just immediately know what I was doing, being able to just get around the environment and not have to stand and stop every 5 seconds to think, okay, I need to hold this combination of buttons in this particular order to pick up, a ration or something. And that was nice, and it made the game feel a lot more just immediate.
Yeah, I mean, like there's that Dara O'Brien sketch, isn't there, where you're meant to be in control of this kind of great super spy who can't like just crouch down and walk forward; he has to crouch down and crawl. But I always felt that those controls were purposefully sort of restrictive to what you wanted to do in the game to kind of get around some other maybe technical things which weren't possible. You had to play it a lot slower than that way because it forced you to play it slower because there was no other way to play it slower. So if you wanted to get somewhere quickly, you had to run and then you would be seen. So it kind of dictated the pace of the gameplay a little more in the older games. Whereas this, you're kind of more free to do what you want. If you click in the left stick, you'll sprint, which is probably one of my favorite things about it is the camera work and the camera movement when you're moving around, and especially when you sprint and there's a real sort of like weight to the movement, it just feels really, really nice. And when you are sprinting, you feel very, very exposed to that moment. But there's nothing beats sort of like running and sprinting across a road and then hitting square and then just diving into the mud. You feel a real connection to the actual world itself and the actions that you're performing.
Does it just overall, does it still feel like the Metal Gear Solid universe?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely does. And I think those sort of things are defined by the NPCs that are in the environment and the things that they're doing. You don't have a radar in this one because it's set in like olden times, like the 60s or some shit. So you have just a set of binoculars which have a directional microphone on them. So you'll kind of just look around and you can look at guards, and if you look at them long enough and zoom in close enough, it'll tag them. So they're always visible by a marker on the screen. So as you look around, if they're in the distance, you can see a marker to see roughly where somebody is, which is really useful. The Metal Gear games are kind of defined by the characters and the NPCs that are in the environment. So as you're looking around and you're looking at the characters and you zoom in on them, you can hear the things that they're saying. And it is all about the things that they're saying, which, is kind of very, very Metal Gear-y. They say really stupid things, I guess, that you wouldn't expect them to say. They're complaining of like stomach aches classically. There's lots of callbacks to kind of older Metal Gear games. So yeah, as the kind of like discussing things, and these are the things which I think make it different from, it's obviously feels a bit more like a Splinter Cell game with a new control system. But as you're running around and the way in which you're interacting with the characters and the NPCs, and when you're trying to get a kind of combat them or not combat them and sneak around, that's where it feels like a Metal Gear game.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't have it in sort of like Splinter Cell games. You just have a guard who's like smoking, or then he'll just go up against a wall and take a piss. There's this sort of like Japanesey sort of like caricature of these soldiers who are meant to be super soldiers, but they do really stupid things. And it just sets up more of a playground, which is the emphasis on play, rather than something that's just a bit more gritty, a Splinter Cell game or a Hitman game, which doesn't have that kind of lighter edge to it.
Yeah. I guess the thing with that is that it does, as you say, make the world feel more alive. It gives it makes it feel very much like a game, but just that the fact that there are these characters that are behaving in ways that aren't just just a doll just there for you to just kill and move on to the next thing. Like everything seems there's an action and a reaction to it, and just like listening to the characters and what they say. I can see how it definitely makes you feel a lot more alive than. I think it's the kind of thing where you're talking about. I mean, I haven't played the Infamous game yet, but I mean, how does that, in terms of you saying that the world doesn't feel as alive? I mean, compared to like other open world games, like say like the last GTA game, where just walking around in the streets, it does feel like you're walking through LA because you've got all these people around you talking and just interacting, and it feels like an environment that you're actually a part of.
Yeah, it definitely does. But I think that the main interactions kind of that you'd have in a GTA game with the world to what you'd have in, say, an Infamous game are quite vastly different, because in a GTA game they're more passive. They're kind of like populating the environment, and they do react to what you do though, which is great, but they do it in a more subtle way. Like if you go and punch someone in the face in GTA and there's people around, some of them will run away scared, but other ones will take out their camera phones and take a picture of it and things like that. But there is less of that direct interaction, because say in Infamous you can run around and you can blow stuff up and people will run away, but there is that definite sort of less of a connection there. That the inhabitants of like a GTA or GTA 5 in particular feel as though they're going about their business. If you're in like the city districts, people would more often than not be in suits, so they feel more contextual to where they're supposed to be, and they'll say different things and they'll react in different ways. So in Infamous, they're just there to react to the things that you're doing. So if you're blowing stuff up, their reaction will be to run away, or if it's not in a mission or any kind of combative area, they will kind of cheer for you or boo you depending on whether you're good or bad, and it just feels a little bit more hollow, and there's a weird thing about the art direction in that game as well, is I can't tell the difference between anything from like buildings to people. I'm finding it very difficult to enjoy at the minute.
Right.
Yeah, but in kind of then comparison to like Metal Gear again, is that like I said, it's much more refined, and it's kind of maybe unfair to do a direct comparison, but it is interesting that you can make something feel lot more alive, a lot more engaging, and a lot more fun to play by just restricting things. Well, not restricting things, but scaling things down and focusing on the smaller bits a little bit more. And also the fact that, I guess in this Metal Gear game, which, it doesn't really happen in too many of the others, I think because of kind of technical limitations. In previous Metal Gears, most of the enemies that you fight have kind of, they're all in their armor and you can't necessarily see their faces. Where in this Metal Gear, you can see everyone's faces and everyone looks different, and you can recognize people as you move around. So you can see that guy who got in a Jeep and drove off somewhere. You might notice him that he was in a different place earlier on, so then you kind of know, oh, he's not where he was previously, so I can go over there and it'll be empty, and that's sure enough, that's what will happen. And being able to have those kind of that visual fidelity to notice those differences is really interesting.
So I'm presuming that the game has sold, by the sounds of it, has sold you to probably get Phantom Pain when it comes out.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always really enjoyed the Metal Gear games, and this one, but I had Metal Gear fatigue definitely, because they were just so sort of, I don't know, difficult to play, or just like those restrictions in the controls and the movement just made it feel a bit sort of like, oh, okay, I wish I could kind of do these things that I can do in other games, which feel a lot more modern. Than like the Metal Gear games just turned into better cutscenes, rather than kind of better gameplay.
Yeah,
this definitely feels like better gameplay.
I like the fact that it didn't mess around with getting you pretty quickly into the action. It set up the scene really well, and you got that Skullface character, and it's like, well, he looks like a bad guy. Probably going to presume he's the bad guy, and it doesn't take too long with Snake, saying, right, this is where I am, this is what I'm doing. And I didn't think Kiefer Sutherland was too bad. He wasn't really noticeable.
I think that's the thing. He sounds really wooden, though, in places. I've gone back and listened to a few things, like, more specifically. And, I get that feeling, though, like, there's that classic story about Star Wars man. What's his name? The guy who wrote Star Wars. Him, anyway.
That guy.
That guy. George Lucas.
There you go.
And there's that classic story of Harrison Ford saying, like, oh, you can write this shit down, but you sure as hell can't say it.
Yeah.
Because it just sounds stupid when you say it. And Metal Gear's always had that issue, and I think maybe old Kiefer is thinking that kind of in his head, because some of the things he says are just delivered kind of with no real emotion whatsoever.
Yeah.
And some of the things he says are just downright ridiculous, and it has that very sort of exposition heavy thing to it where, the person you're talking to will say, oh, they'll say the name of the camp, and then there'll be like a 30-second kind of monologue of Snake just giving a history of it, and it's like, it tries to imply some things by what people are saying that to make you think you're just listening into a conversation between two sort of like pros in their field. But on the other hand, then it's got to explain stuff in enough detail for you to understand as a viewer. And they just feel a little bit off in some places, but what else can you expect from a Metal Gear game, really? But I mean, in terms of the length, let's just go back to that to kind of finish off, I guess. It took me an hour and a half to play through it. I kind of did it just in one sitting, and finished the main kind of quest line. But from what people are saying, and you're definitely right, you can finish it in about 5 or 10 minutes if you know exactly where to go and you know all the routes and things like that, or you've unlocked enough kind of the bigger weapons to just run through and blast everyone away.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of other side content as well. There's 4 or 5, I think, additional missions that you can do, which are all set in the same place, but they're kind of in the daytime. You'll start off on a different part of the island. You'll have a different objective, and some of them are a bit more fun than others. So, you might have to just go and get kind of a specific person who's captive there and put them in a Jeep and drive off, or you might have to assassinate 2 people, but you don't know where they are, so you have to go in and find them and use your binoculars and then track them down and things like that. So a bit more open, sort of like a bit more of that classic Hitman style of just giving you a space to play around with, which is really exciting, I think, for a Metal Gear game.
So, I mean, we might as well from there carry on straight on to Infamous then. I spoke a little bit about it. Not as keen by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I'm finding it really difficult to enjoy. Like, I really enjoyed the 2 previous games. They were really, really good. Like the first one was just sort of like a superhero sort of comic book sort of style. Just didn't do a huge amount, but did what it did quite well, and it was just enjoyable, you know. The second one was much more refined, and I really, really enjoyed the second one. It played more on that kind of setting up a superhero like posse sort of thing. And this one is a completely different set of characters. It's set in Seattle, I think, where the other two were a fictional city. Oh, no, it was New Orleans. It's not a fictional city. Yeah, and it has that sort of like kind of new game in a series, but on a new console, new audience syndrome of having to teach you the ropes again, and new character, building them back up, and it just feels really slow and sluggish to get going. And but I think mainly because some of the ways in which they've tried to kind of implement kind of that progression is very, very repetitive. So you get a series of powers. Where in the first two games you just have like this electricity power. The powers that you have are based on different sort of so you have a smoke power which allows you to kind of move through walls and things like that, and a neon power which allows you to kind of just, I guess, move around quicker, but you can't necessarily move through things, and then a few other ones as well. And you pick these up one at a time, and when you pick up a new one for the first time, you then lose your old power for a short amount of time and have to go through 4 different locations, do something, kill a bunch of people, then unlock a new ability which was the same as an old ability you had on the same button, and then you get the old power back, but you can only use one power at a time, and you've got to find a specific thing in the environment, so something that emits smoke or a neon sign or a TV screen, to be able to then transfer to that set of powers. And it's just really kind of slow and frustrating, and you don't know whether one's good or bad, and I don't know, it's just, I'm finding it very difficult to love.
Is it just, I don't know, as you said, it's got that kind of early in the sort of next gen console system life where it has kind of ideas that sort of in the next game might be fully fleshed out and it might make more sense.
No, I think they're genuinely bad ideas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like I can see this different power thing sort of kind of a way that it would sort of work, but because you can only have one at a time, and the process you need to go through to switch them is going to a specific kind of place or finding a specific thing, pressing a button, waiting a few seconds. That's just annoying anyway. In the middle of like a firefight, it's kind of impossible, because as soon as you start going to get one of those powers, you'll get shot by somebody,
right.
And it will reset. There's no real nuance to it, where that I've noticed, which is, I guess, another flaw in itself if it is the case, where some powers seem to be better against some things than others. Then there is a slight difference in some of the powers, where with the neon one, it highlights like the weak points of an enemy, which is always the head. It's not a weak point; it's just the head.
Right.
And
does it make
also
does it make it blatantly obvious it's the head every time?
Oh yeah, it's just got like a red sphere around it. Right. They look like they're dressed up as like Mars Attacks characters. It looks ridiculous. And then it highlights their feet as well. So if you hit them in the feet, you kind of detain them and knock them out, essentially, which gives you good karma points. But if you hit them in the head, it makes them explode, which gives you bad karma points because you've killed somebody. But the other powers don't have this. So you could just fire at them. You do whatever you want. But then you switch to that power, and then suddenly you have to really specifically target the feet, which is difficult to do. And it seems to be only one foot as well. So if they're standing in a particular way, you can't really hit it. It's just, from every angle, it's frustrating. And then you run out of juice, essentially, for the power that you're using. And then have to go and find an outlet to recharge. Where if you want to stick with one power, you have to find a specific kind of smoke outlet, for example. Whereas in the first two games, you just had electricity, so you just go up to anything that was on, that had electricity running through it, which is easily identifiable.
Yeah.
But now it's smoke, and if it's dark, you can't see the smoke pillars. It's so annoying.
I guess that really breaks up the flow of the game as well. Then, if you're sort of in an area and you have to stop to go back and find that,
Yeah.
and you can't just kind of go like forward in the direction that you intend to go and having to go back. And I guess it's like the Bioshock Infinite syndrome of having to kind of consistently rummage around in trash cans and stuff and just not carry on with just doing the thing that you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And the enemies just seem to be exactly the same. There's like a couple of different variants, but they're not easily identifiable as being different, other than that they move around a bit more and a bit tougher. You get stuck in kind of situations where projectiles will just be hit at you, and then you'll be blown somewhere, and as you land, you'll have another one hit you, and then you'll run out of stuff and have to run and try and find somewhere else. And the city itself, again, go back to it, is from a lifelessness point of view.
Well, it's
it also yeah, exactly. It also has in the first one, or the first one specifically, the city was separated into different regions, and different kind of groups controlled those regions, and they had different abilities and what they could do. So you had different play styles as you moved through the game. So you learned those progressively as you kind of moved from one area to another, as they were locked off and then unlocked. And then as you opened it all out, you had to adapt depending on where you were. Whereas this one, because of the narrative context, just has like this organization that are controlling everything. So they just inhabit everywhere. Although there are kind of like smaller little enemies like drug dealers, but you don't have that nuance and that difference in fighting different people. And you don't have that sort of, whilst some areas might have more guards and be tougher, they all just feel the same. So there's no satisfaction in moving through the city itself and feeling like you're in a different area. And it's altogether just, annoying. I think that's the adjective I'd use, just annoying, frustrating, I guess.
Yeah, does it just feel like there's no real sense of progression then? It just kind of goes at one pace.
Yeah, there's no sense of progression. It's mainly because you feel as though you're being given with one hand and then punched in the face with another. Just every time you try and progress. The characters aren't necessarily likable. The main guy wears double denim, which for a start is just a no-go.
Yeah.
And he has like badges on it and things like that. And he's like grungy because he's in Seattle. His brother looks like Ross from Friends, who had a bad kind of couple of weeks. There's very few redeeming features in the game, which is annoying because I really like the other kind of games. And with every new power I unlock, I expect it to be a little bit more satisfying, but it just gets ever frustrating. £400 down the drain.
Yeah. And I suppose we'll round off. I mean, have you played any of Battlefield 4 at all, or is that?
No, Killzone.
Oh, Killzone. Sorry.
Yeah. See, I have played a bit of Killzone, which looks lovely, but I had that thing of wherever I was going and whatever I was doing, I didn't know whether it was the right thing or in the right direction. I didn't update it though, because obviously with the PS4 you can background download all your updates and things,
yeah.
Which means that when you buy a game which came out, at launch of the console, when you turn it, like you put it in the machine, turn it on and start playing it, it's not the most up-to-date one. So apparently the patch that I've downloaded fixes a lot of things that are kind of a little bit broken with it when I was playing it. The navigation system and things like that were a bit kind of funny. But on the whole, it seems pretty solid. I've kind of enjoyed the parts on it that I knew I was doing the right thing, and they had some kind of neat ideas in there as well. So on the whole, it's like a first-person shooter. Some parts of it really reminded me of Alien Isolation, actually.
Ah. It's amazing, like, it could be a whole discussion for another day, but just this idea that, is there such thing as a game that comes out just 100% this is the game that we wanted to make? There's no day one patch, there's no patch after a week. It's just the idea of like the navigation system not working the way it should be. It's just it's mind-blowing to think of. Yeah,
I think there's just I think the list of things that you can do in games and that you would like to do in a game is much bigger now than it ever used to be.
Yeah.
So you can have this sort of like ideal, you always have your minimal viable product, the thing that you want to release with and the thing that you'd be happy to release with. But then you always have the stuff around that which you'd like to put in at a later date or kind of fix at a later date. And I guess that's the main thing, isn't it? It's like you can ship something which doesn't work as intended, but doesn't stop the game from being played. Just kind of halts the enjoyment in some cases. And it will, it's kind of, they'll never, well, there will be games which are shipped day one, which are kind of good to go. But there's the option for leaving some things until later.
Yeah, true.
Because you have to bring in some revenue at some point.
True. Well, I guess I should try and talk about something I've played as well, not let you hog all the glory. I have played a bit of South Park, The Stick of Truth. I haven't actually played it as much as I'd like to at this point, mainly because I have downloaded Netflix and now my life is over, which I was warned would be the case, but I foolishly agreed, so hey, there you go. Yeah. But South Park, it's a light RPG, I guess. I mean, I'm no expert in RPGs, even though I've now finished one.
Yeah, come on, you are now.
Yeah, I
Every
guess.
bit of as an expert than I am.
Yeah. But with my brief knowledge on the genre, it has the tropes of an RPG in terms of its battle mechanics. There seems to be two types of battle mechanics when it comes to RPGs, in that you have either the one where you just hit a command and it does it, or the one where you hit a command and then you have like some sort of timed sequence or directional input that you need to put in to get the most amount of that attack possible.
Yeah. And
it goes for the second option here, but it kind of does it in a way which the battle system seems quite slow, certainly compared to what I've been doing with Final Fantasy VII, and certainly compared to Final Fantasy VI, which is a really snappy, quick, fast battle system. In here, it really tries to get the most out of the setting, the environment it's in the South Park universe, which is fine, certainly for the first couple of times when you battle a certain type of enemy, or when you're using your characters, whether it's you or, well, not you because your character doesn't talk, but whether you have Princess Kenny or Butters or whatever, and they use their special powers and stuff. And that's all funny for the first couple of goes, but it's a little bit too slow. But luckily, it's not a game that, from what I can see and from what I've read about it, it's not a game that is particularly kind of grind heavy. So you're not going to be in a position where you're going to have to sit through like 2 hours of that system just to be able to progress to the next area. It certainly seems that it's a game designed in, there'll be times where you'll need to do a little bit, but it kind of keeps the flow going, and you're going from one place to the next and not having to sort of stay around in one area too long, which is good, because I that's where my patience level is at for these kind of things usually. But it's very funny, it's written by the South Park team. It looks like an episode of South Park, but you can actually move the characters about, which is, I think, the thing that most people have always wanted, certainly going back to the shambles that was the original South Park game and South Park Rally, which I actually quite liked, but I think I'm the only one. But they look dreadful, and they look even worse now. But this, it looks like South Park, it acts like South Park, it sounds like South Park. I'm sure it smells like South Park if you smell it. And it has, it's like an extended episode almost. But you have your character that's you, who doesn't talk, and so obviously there's the jokes that play around that. All the characters in the show, and they're all as they are, but it's really cool that, so it takes this setting of the imagination of all these kids and turns it into Dungeons and Dragons, and so like you have weapons like a stick, or I'm trying to think what else they have, or a coat hanger or whatever, but it's used in the grand scheme of things of being like Cloud Sword or something, has the same damage properties or defensive properties, but it's what the kids can find around to play with, and there's a real charm in the imagination of that that I really like, and it's that's part of what makes South Park what it is, the imagination for some of the stuff that they think of, essentially, and the fact they've been able to do it for like 20 odd years now or so, which is just crazy. And yeah, it's just generally very funny. The setting in terms of like what you have to do, it feels a little bit fetch quest heavy. You know, it's just it's extended versions of fetch quests. I don't know whether the game will have more to offer than that, but again, it kind of gets away with it because it's South Park, and because everything that you end up doing, whether it's you go to the top of this tower and you fight off a Mongolian army, you know, it's so ridiculous that it gets away with it. I'll see as I get further on if it, you know, gets a little bit too tedious with that, but you know, for the time being.
Yeah, that's the difficulty with a game like that, isn't it? Is that it has to deliver jokes because it's a South Park game. You know, like it has to be about the jokes. Like from what I've seen, like the attack moves that you do, those are a lot of the jokes. So you pick up new attacks, you get new jokes essentially.
Yeah.
You have to, and like I said, it's very light. It's not very grind heavy because it has to keep progressing with a story. It has to keep giving you new sort of like audio and visual content to keep you interested, to feel like a South Park episode. But then to put in the RPG elements, which traditionally in kind of RPG tropes would kind of slow things down, dealing with that must be like a really interesting challenge. And you're right, to see whether they can get that balance right kind of over a longer kind of game would be really interesting. But is it really accessible to like a non-real South Park watching person like myself?
I mean, if you don't, it depends. If you don't watch South Park because you don't enjoy the humour, then this isn't the game for you. I think it's actually kind of the perfect game for me, in terms of, you know, I've not watched South Park really since like the 5th or 6th season, and I came back for a season or two and I've watched the odd episode, but for the most part I'm pretty out of loop with it. But it's, you know, it's got enough, it's got its own storyline that's going on. I mean, it has all the stuff it does in terms of referencing older episodes. It's done mainly just in, as I've seen so far, just the visual gag that you'll just see, like just you'll open up a cupboard and there'll be whatever stuff from whatever episode, or what was the other thing? Oh, like the collectibles in the game are the Chin Pokemon, and they're just there to collect around the environment, and they don't do anything, but you just get a Chin Pokemon and you see, you know, whatever one you've picked up. But yeah, because it's the perfect kind of game for me in that it's a light RPG and it's its own storyline essentially, that I can just kind of come straight into it and I can get on with it. And I mean, anyone that does like South Park and has watched it religiously will enjoy it. It might help to have like at least an inkling of an idea with RPGs, but it doesn't do anything way too taxing. I mean, you're not having to set up some crazy custom setup for any of your characters. You know, you can pretty much get by with what is given to you, and it makes it pretty clear. Sort of, I mean, it has a few things with the battle system in that enemies can either be in certain positions, which means that you can't melee attack them, so you have to do long range attacks, or vice versa. But it makes it really clear, sort of visually, and it tells you. But it doesn't hold your hand with it, you know. But it makes it obvious what you need to do. So yeah, it's nothing too demanding in that sort of spectrum. Yeah, certainly something that I think you could easily pick up and get along with pretty easily.
Yeah, I've been tempted to check it out. You know, like I've watched South Park, but I've never kind of watched a full season or anything, or it's not one of those shows which I kind of went, oh, it's Friday night, it's South Park night or whatever. It's just kind of on, you know, one of those music channels that shows. South Park usually references things that are in the real world, you know, and it usually picks the right kind of jokes and the right things to play on. So when you watch them a few years down the line, you know, they'll still be funny. Whereas with the game, and I'm not sure they have that option to do it. I mean, do they do any sort of things related to the real world in the game?
It would be difficult for South Park to do that. I mean, I haven't seen anything that I can see like that. But I mean, considering this game has been in development for years upon years, compared to a typical episode of South Park that can be written, done, and finished to go in a week, I think that's a little bit out of outreach of what would have been possible.
Yeah, because it was like delayed for like a year, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Publisher issues and things.
so it doesn't do anything like that. I mean, I haven't got far enough into the game that they might do stuff that sort of references the RPG style type of game. Maybe, I'm not sure. But I mean, like the most stuff I've seen that I recognise as being, from older episodes, like Al Gore's there and he's like an NPC, and there's the whole thing with Man Bear Pig, but no, there's nothing that I can see or have seen so far that is particularly topical.
It does some, isn't it like the menu system or something? All of the party management is based on like Facebook or like social networking.
Yeah. So when you meet an NPC, they usually will befriend you, and they'll send you like a friend request, and so you go into the inventory setup or the menu screen, and you've got a bunch of options, and one of them is it's just your friends list, and they're having these conversations, and you can see like Token talking to Cartman, and Token saying, "Look, you can't just call me a blacksmith," and Cartman saying, "Well, when I see you, that's what I think of." So stuff like that, and that's constantly being updated. So that's really funny. There's a lot of gags that have come from just that alone.
Be interesting to see, like, going back onto this kind of like topical thing, like, because having worked on a game which is sort of like data driven and needs to be updated at any point, having that option to do things is, I think, as we'll see more and more kind of in mainstream games. There's definitely that kind of scope that you can pull all that content from a server somewhere that can be updated. So those comments that could be posted on those boards could be, referencing things that are happening in the real world.
Yeah, and that's true.
New jokes and content. Like I was thinking with an RPG kind of like framework and the way that kind of a South Park sort of like works, it would have been interesting if they would have been able to deliver kind of like DLC packs which were specifically written based on things that are happening more recent. I don't think they're doing that. I think it's a massive kind of time sink and a huge developer cost as well.
Yeah.
But it would have been an interesting thing to see. Like if there's people who can do that, it would be the kind of the South Park guys.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty cool idea. But overall, I've enjoyed my time with it so far. I was kind of at the tail end of finishing Final Fantasy VII, and then I got started with Final Fantasy VI, and then Netflix has come along. So at some point I will get around to finishing South Park, but it's kind of on the back burner at the moment, along with most of my Steam library. Oh,
speaking of which, did you do what I asked?
What was it that you asked me to do?
I asked you to play the Stanley Parable.
I haven't done that yet. No. Look, I was being sociable this weekend, and then I went to a wrestling show. These things take precedence to other things.
Like, is the wrestling show not sociable?
Well, no, because I don't want to talk to anyone there. I just want to watch.
Yeah, that's fair. Was it good?
It was all right. Electric Ballroom in Camden was pretty cool. 700 people. It was fun.
Who was there?
No one that I think you would know of.
Okay.
Triple H wasn't there, or The Undertaker.
Oh no.
No.
What about Shawn Michaels?
No, he wasn't there. He hasn't really been anywhere for a couple of years now. He retired. So.
What about Bret Hart?
No, because he
must have fallen on hard times.
He's about 85 years old at this point. So.
They should do like they do, with like ex-football players and sports people who go into like doing public speaking at events and things like that. And just like old boys clubs sort of things. Wrestlers should do that, and they should just go around the sort of the amateur circuit.
They do like stuff like that. Like a show I went to last year, they had Bret Hart there, but this was kind of more focused on just sort of like British talent and up and comers and stuff. So, but they do stuff where they'll have people fly over, like the older guys, and I know like the WWE have people go around and do public speaking and stuff like that. But this was like this was a best way to describe it. It was kind of like a kind of punk vibe to it, just uprising of British wrestling. And how the hell did we get onto this, by the way?
I don't know. I've regretted ever even showing any interest.
See, you get me started and I don't stop. Anyway, moving on. We went to Resd last Friday.
Yes. We had a road trip.
We did. We had a little road trip, which was quite fun. Why is it that the journey back seemed a hell of a lot longer than the way there?
It was only about 15 minutes longer.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, you were sleeping for some of it though.
I was. You and Ian were quite boring, to be quite honest. So yeah. It was a long day. Looking at video games all day, it takes it out of you.
It does, yeah. Like as I said on the day, we were down there in the morning for when it started at 11. And then I was sure we'd been there for about at least 5 or 6 hours. And I looked at my watch, and it was like 12:30 in the afternoon. And it was, it was, it's just standing and talking, and had a lot of people I hadn't seen in a long time. So it was good to bump into those guys.
For you, I mean, it kind of really struck me just how many people know you. Like I know that you're pretty well known. You know, I see you on Twitter, and you've got over 1,000 followers, and it's like, yeah, he's got his claws into the industry, but you're making the rounds.
Yeah, it's all Unity stuff, which is
True.
It's good. Been pretty fortunate in that respect.
Yeah.
Over the last year or two.
But
yeah, we saw some games.
We did. Anything that took your fancy in particular?
It was good to see some PS4 games there. There was a lot of Sony games. They had their PS Love Indies stand out. It's good to finally get to play Ollie Ollie, which I'm looking forward to coming out on PS4 at some point. It's like July, isn't it?
Yeah, around about then. Much more enjoyable to play on a PS4 controller than the Vita, because I really, really like Ollie Ollie. I like the control system that it uses. With that said, playing it on the Vita can sometimes be damn right infuriating. And it was nice to really get a good grasp, because I briefly held a PS4 controller when I was in game once, but between playing it for a little bit around yours and then playing it over on the Friday at Resd, I immediately just everything felt so much more natural when playing Ollie Ollie, and I was like, yeah, I would, as much as I like this game, I'd probably like it that much more if I had it to play on the PS4.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to coming out. I mean, when you buy your PS4 as well,
you
can do the leaderboards on that, do some score chasing. But yeah, that was good. It was good to finally get to play some Towerfall as well. As we'd previously discussed, neither of us have enough friends to justify buying it. So it's great to see that there and have a go on the old 4-player stuff. What did you think of Towerfall? I
like it. I see why it was about the most popular thing, or if only the only popular thing on the Ouya. It has a really nice pixel art to it. I like the way the characters kind of bounce up and down, and when they land, you can see them reacting to landing and stuff. It doesn't. I mean, we've spoken before about that and kind of comparisons to stuff like Samurai Gun, which I prefer just because, like, the movement of the characters and using the sword and using the bullets, there feels like there's a lot more that you can do. Towerfall feels a little bit restrictive in terms of, the combat with other enemies. But both games do a similar thing in that you really have to take advantage of the environment, knowing where the other opponents are at all times. So if you can jump from the bottom of the screen to the top to sort of ambush an opponent who's sort of like in the top left corner or something, they both do similar things like that. But it's still really good fun. It's certainly something that if you have people over, which in this day and age just doesn't seem to be possible, it's something that would be a great kind of party game in that regards.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the comparisons with Samurai Gun and always the first thing that I kind of come to, and I've been guilty of saying, oh, it's it's just Samurai Gun, but not as fun, isn't it? Because I really, really enjoy Samurai Gun, but Towerfall was great. You can there's only so much that you can kind of do with these sort of games, and you can do them wrong, but to the credit of Towerfall, it's been done correctly. And the biggest thing that's different about it and Samurai Gun is the fact that it's actually out now and you can play it. So for all the people who I know and who I've said myself, oh, it's just Samurai Gun, but kind of with arrows, the difference is that it's actually out and kind of you can buy it on your console and you can play it. But it's genuinely it's a really good kind of fun game, but it kind of misses that cinematic feel that you were saying, like Samurai Gun, when you kill someone, like the black borders will come down and kind of like narrow the screen, or if you get into a stalemate at the end, you'll have the kind of the sun going down in the background, and you'll have a little bit of a kind of kind of pistols at dawn sort of thing, pistols and swords at dawn. But that's the fun of kind of like that I've had in Samurai Gun. But I'm glad I've played Towerfall now. Definitely kind of wait a bit longer though for the old SG to come out.
Yeah. Alien Isolation. What did you think of that?
I really enjoyed Alien Isolation. I wasn't really sure what to like. I remember when it was being kind of talked about things that it looked cool, but I thought it would just be like an Alien first-person game, like a shooter primarily. But since seeing all the stuff that's coming out about it, it's more of it's like a horror game, but it's a very kind of tense, atmospheric kind of thriller sort of game where it is just you and an alien on a ship. Well, certainly for the parts that we played in the demo. I'm not sure what the fuller kind of scope of the game is going to be, but I think most of it is going to just be you and an alien isolated, which explains the name quite well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does a lot of kind of really neat things. It looks beautiful. You have your scanner. When you look at your scanner, you'll have a really nice depth of field effect on in the background. So you're focusing on your scanner and you're restricting your view of everything else. You're just focused on this thing, but it'll still beep in the background if you kind of put it away, so you know if something is around. It definitely just has that alien feel, the kind of like 70s alien feel, that 70s future sort of thing that was really kind of indicative of why Aliens is so kind of admired by everybody. It just has this feel about it. It's just aliens.
The things I got out of watching it, because I was watching you play it. I wouldn't play it myself because I'm a wuss. I'll be the first to admit it. But the two things were the field of view would change when you were sort of looking at your radar, and you had that kind of 8mm grainy vibe going on in the background. And it's such a cool little thing that it does, but it just looks amazing. And the kind of cutscene where we were introduced to the alien, and the camera takes control, and you're hiding behind the desk, and the xenomorph's tail kind of whips over the top, and then kind of goes back up. Just even watching it is like this is very tense. Like it's got the atmosphere and the intensity just bang on, absolutely bang on.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I went into it expecting kind of scares, like obvious scares at things, and they didn't. The places where you'd expect something to jump out at you, they didn't jump out at you, and the places where you would thought you were safe, something would happen, which I thought was kind of pretty cool. It didn't just stick by kind of traditional kind of scary moments, non-scary moments. You always felt kind of on edge, but that kind of it's a game that's definitely about focus. It's about paying attention to what it is that you're trying to do at any one point. So yeah, when you do pull the scanner up, you're looking at the scanner at that point. You can't really see much else. You can just see kind of blurs and shapes of things that are in the background at that point. Or if you're using your torch, you can use your torch in focus mode, which will put the beam onto a specific area, and you can't see very much around you at that point. Or you can have it just kind of generally on, and you're lighting a bigger area. But then you're lighting a bigger area, and you're more likely to kind of be seen if you're using your torch at any one point. But yeah, it's slow paced, but in a good way. It looks beautiful, and I was pretty rubbish at it as well. I have a thing with games where I like kind of my playthrough to be kind of my experience of it. So in the demo, it's kind of structured into two parts, and the first part is just exploring and doing a couple of objectives of turning certain things on or whatever, but feeling like you're being kind of watched essentially. And then there's the second part with the alien kind of comes down and you're being hunted, and I pretty much died at the first possible opportunity that it's possible to die on, but I just kind of put my controller down and got up and walked out, and the guy was like, oh, you can play again if you died, and I was just like, no, I died. If I was in that situation on that alien ship, I wouldn't have been any use to anyone. I would have died straight away. But most other people kind of restarted at that point.
Yeah, including Ian about 85 times.
Yeah. Well, like I was pleased with what I was playing, and I was enjoying what I was playing to the point where I thought, actually, when this comes out, I will get it,
Yeah.
and that's when I'll play it. I didn't need any more convincing.
Gang Beasts might be the most favoritist thing that I'll play this year.
Yeah, it wins the award for worst name, best game. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know who the hell came up with that name, but give them an award, maybe? I'm not sure. But the actual gameplay, again, it's that local multiplayer kind of game, but it's a free-for-all beat 'em up, and you have those kind of... Remember Morph from the old Smart BBC art show? You have like 4 of them, and they're all just going around drunkenly shoving and punching at each other, and it's just, like, visually, it's just very, very funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious. They're all kind of physics-driven, kind of like ragdolls. That's always happening. They're just ragdolls, and the forces are being put through certain their joints, and somehow they're managing to stay up and walk and throw punches. But yeah, it's just so funny from the visual aspect, and I didn't actually get to play. I just watched for quite a long time, but I was laughing so much. And they have kind of neat environments where you kind of interact with the environment. So the main one that I saw was a kind of a Ferris wheel at the end of a pier. And obviously you can jump on the Ferris wheel and swing around it, and you can throw people off the Ferris wheel. But essentially it's sort of like a Royal Rumble mechanic, isn't it? Where you've got to get the other people in the same space as you over something or into something, and you be the last one standing to live. And the pier one was really funny because they would go around and they'd throw these kind of like punches, and because it's physics driven, and depending on when they throw the punch and depending on what was happening before that, so where the momentum is going, some punches might not connect properly or just kind of turn into slaps, or sometimes they'll be really aggressive and knock the other characters out completely, and they'll be stunned for a couple of seconds. But yeah, as you run around, and the floorboards of the pier would fall away, so you could fall through the floorboards. And I think as you were playing it, you were stuck on those floorboards for about a minute, just hanging on, while everyone else was just kind of trying to beat each other up. For one moment, I thought you'd just be the last one there because you just hung on for long enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, in this one session that people are having, there was 2 people left, and the other guy was getting beaten, and he knew he was going to lose. So his tactic was to run away. So he ended up running to like the left of the screen, and the further you go to the left of the screen, the easier the floorboards came away on the pier, to the point they would just fall just instantly as you stepped on them. So it was just this mess of kind of like physics working together with like soft body physics and like rigid body physics, of things just flying everywhere and just knees buckling and people falling and just hanging on to things. It was just so funny,
Yeah, I mean, it's had a likening to sort of the QWOP mechanics in terms of the controls. It's a little bit tighter than that, but it still feels quite wonky in a forced kind of way. And it's all there is you've got the controls, and you've got the left and right triggers, which act as your way to punch. I could never quite figure out how to grapple onto someone, because it'd be amazing to watch these 2 people punching each other, and then suddenly they'd kind of grab each other at the same time, and then they'd start pirouetting around like they were doing the tango or the waltz or something, and then one guy would pick the other one up and just hold him up in the air and then just throw him off the side. And it was just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the funniest moment was where there was 4 people playing, and 2 of them were either side of another guy just holding his kind of shoulders, I think it was. So then the third guy, the guy who was left, came in to try and like punch the one that they were holding. But somehow what happened was that the guy in the middle sort of like latched onto him and managed to pick him up slightly. And then the physics kind of went a bit funny. So the 2 guys who were either side ended up holding the other guy's legs who'd just come into the fight. And then they just threw him. They just threw him over. So he was trying to capitalize on a situation where someone was in the worst possible position. And in the end, that person who was in the worst position just ran away. And the other guy ended up losing. It's just funny. I think it's on... I was talking to the devs while you were playing. And they put it on Steam, and it took like a week or so on Steam on Greenlight to get greenlit. But I think it's on IndieDB. You can search for it, Gang Beasts, and I think there's a downloadable build of it.
It's around somewhere. Hotline Miami 2 looks a lot like the first one.
Yep, move on.
Yep. It's pretty much it. I mean, I like it, so, We'll
Yeah,
see.
it just looks It looks exactly like the first one. You'd expect something different from a sequel. From the money it's made, you'd expect some of that to be put back into it,
Yeah.
or some obvious sort of representation of that, some money being put back into it. But it just looks exactly the same. From a visual point of view, it's going to be different, obviously, with the music and stuff, I'm assuming. But I'm not interested in any narrative differences because I didn't understand what the first one was anyway, and it's not the main point of it. So, calling it Hotline Miami 2, it just looks like Hotline Miami kind of more...
Just
more
an expansion pack,
Miami.
essentially.
Yeah.
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 There's another Worms game.
Is
Why
there?
not? Yeah, there was the Worms Battlegrounds or something. That was there.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Tango Fiesta is coming along. Really, like the build I saw of it a couple of weeks ago at London Indies compared to what they've got now. It's pretty crazy how much they've managed to pack in a couple of weeks. So that they're really doing double time on it by the looks of it.
Yeah, no, it's coming along, and it was good to get to play it, and it was fun. It's kind of lacks a bit of soul at the minute, though. I think
Yeah,
a bit of heart. It's the joke that it's playing. I don't know. It's kind of like whispered rather than kind of like shouted out. Obviously it's not finished, so it's difficult to judge it based on that. But it was fun to play. I just want a bit more sort of like fidelity to it, I guess.
yeah. I mean, it had, and you said this before. It's like it's got a kind of comparison to Broforce, and I think Broforce has that core kind of aesthetic of what it's trying to represent down a little bit more at the moment. But I know Broforce has been in development for a lot longer, so I'll give Tango Fiesta the time to get what it's trying to get at.
Yeah, I mean, really, like talking to the Andrews who are working on it. It's only been in development for like 6 weeks. This is built again from the ground up from the Game Jam version from last year. So it's very, very, very early on. Like the core idea is there, and it's obviously going to work. It's just those extra things around the edges which take it from like a fun sort of 5-minute party game to something that you generally want to pay for.
Yeah. Can't think of anything much else that I kind of had too much of an opinion on. But overall, it was a fun day out. Nice to hang out, Titanfall was there. I didn't play that.
Yeah, it was. I've been playing a little bit of Titanfall actually, and I've been really, really enjoying it. It's kind of goes back to the Call of Duty kind of modern warfare days of just being a really solid shooter with nothing else too much over the top of it.
Yeah.
So I've been really, really enjoying that, and it's got Titans in it, which are pretty awesome. But yeah, there was it was good to go back to Rezzed. I went there in the first year when it was down in Brighton, and it was a much smaller event. It was probably about a quarter of the size. There was the indie section in the left field section where all the indie guys were. I think like Mike Bithell was there with Thomas Was Alone, Hotline Miami was in there, Gunpoint was in there, and a few big indie games. And then the rest of it was kind of I think Alien Colonial Marines was on there. I think this is an interesting thing. Like each time I've gone, there's been a big Alien game. The first one was Colonial Marines, and that was obviously a Randy Pitchford game. So there was people going around in marine outfits. There was a xenomorph kind of like alien walking around. Loads of huge stuff going around. And now with the new kind of Alien Isolation game, it's Creative Assembly and Sega, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
It was just a black box.
Yeah.
Really, really understated.
They were just like, look, just play the game. It's all about the game this time. We're not gonna be fancy. Just the game itself will talk for itself, and it did this time. It certainly seems that what they've delivered this time is what we'll actually get in the final package. One would hope.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty confident that it'll come out good. Very, very positive in terms of what I got to play, and very pleased with the game it's sort of shaping up to be. It's whether they can continue that sort of tense atmosphere and
or just expand that
sort of
expand that over a full game is the thing.
Yeah, but I mean, if it was a full game over like 3 hours, like a movie sort of length, you'd be able to get it with the narrative kind of bits written into it. But it's it's a game, so you can't get away with doing a 3-hour game. It's probably got to be about like 8 hours or something.
Yeah.
Whether the the real gamey bits that they put in there. All the other different gameplay mechanics outside of kind of what is fundamentally a stealth and sneaking kind of mechanic of not being seen. Depends what those other things are that are in there, and how many different times you're told to get to a terminal to turn it on, or hack into something, or weld a door shut, or use your welding tools to open a door. We'll see.
Yeah, rest. Fun time. Should do it again next year.
Definitely.
And that is pretty much all I can think of. There was, I don't know if you saw the thing that was going around last night about the game jam that happened in Los Angeles. That was sponsored by Mountain Dew.
Yeah, I was reading about this just earlier on. The guy I know was in the picture.
Oh,
but he hasn't come out and said anything about it.
It was I know Tom from Bossa Studios was there, and and there's a few other people that recognised, but essentially there was this kind of big sponsored event, game jam going on, and they tried to turn it into a reality show, and it got to a point that the indie developers that were there were pretty pissed off, told the certain people to go fuck themselves, and that was that. So yeah,
okay. So did it start out as just a game jam and then turn into?
Well, no, it was put on with the idea that they brought in a bunch of developers, indie developers, and they were going to do a game jam, and then we were going to record it, a little bit like a sort of a reality show. But it got to the point where they were sort of trying to get the tension between certain people and trying to get this all recorded to show out, and they were sort of having to make sure they had like images of Mountain Dew kind of shown in kind of pretty much every shot, making sure people holding it the right way, trying to get them all to smile, trying to find a way to make a game jam exciting. And to be honest, game jams are pretty fun towards the end of it when you've got an actual product, but for the first kind of 75% of it, they're not particularly fun. There's not a lot to show for it. It's just a lot of people sitting around making stuff.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of game jams. Oh, there we go.
I've done a few and they're okay, but yeah, it's not really something I think you can record and present in a television package.
Yeah. Gang Beasts is on Eurogamer. There we go.
Yes, I saw that, which is always good fun.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and this is quite nice today, Russ. I guess I'll see you 2015.
See you next year.
Yeah, you might have another kid by that point. Who knows?
I might do. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
I might have more.
Oh God.
No, I don't think I do. There we go.
Anyway, cool. Well, thank you very much for listening, everyone, and we'll see you again next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.